pain has a strange way of introducing itself as an enemy, while secretly carrying the map to your awakening. Most people spend their entire lives running from the very thing that was meant to transform them. They hide their wounds behind achievement, behind perfection, behind status, behind religion, behind applause, behind endless distractions, but the wound waits patiently because truth does not disappear simply because it is ignored. The deepest suffering in your life was never only about what happened to you. It was about what you were forced to believe about yourself because of what happened to you. A child who is unseen grows into an adult who believes their voice does not matter. A person who is abandoned begins to abandon themselves long before anyone else can leave them. Someone who is constantly criticized starts living with an inner voice that never allows rest. And eventually people begin calling survival a personality. Many human beings are not living freely. They are living defensively. Every reaction, every fear, every attachment, every silence is often the echo of an old wound asking not to be touched again. Some people become aggressive because once they felt powerless. Some become people pleasers because once love was conditional. Some become emotionally numb because feeling everything almost destroyed them. And the tragedy is not that people are wounded. The tragedy is that they begin to believe the wound is who they are. But your wound is not your identity. It is your initiation. The moment you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, "What is this pain trying to teach me?" something revolutionary begins to happen inside you. Because suffering has intelligence when it is faced consciously. Pain begins to speak, and when pain finally has a voice, it no longer needs to scream through addiction, rage, anxiety, or self-destruction. There are people in this world who look strong because they have never been broken. And then there are people whose presence changes every room they enter because they rebuilt themselves from the ashes of their own suffering. One kind of strength impresses you. The other heals you. The most compassionate people are rarely the people who had easy lives. They are often the people who sat alone in darkness and decided that nobody around them should ever feel that alone again. The most powerful heart, RTs, are usually hearts that once shattered completely. Because brokenness, when faced honestly, destroys illusion. It strips away performance. It burns away ego. It forces a human being to confront what is real. A wound can make you bitter, or it can make you awake. The difference is whether you choose protection or truth. Protection says, "I will never let anyone hurt me again." Truth says, "I will no longer hurt myself trying to avoid pain." There is a profound difference between those two ways of living. One creates walls. The other creates wisdom. Many people think healing means erasing pain. It does not. Healing means your pain no longer controls your life. Healing means you can remember what happened without disappearing inside it. Healing means your past stops being a prison and starts becoming a teacher. Your wound becomes wisdom the moment you stop hiding it in shame, because shame survives in silence. The human soul was never meant to carry pain alone. Some of the strongest people you know are exhausted from pretending they are fine. They learned very early that vulnerability was dangerous, so they became performers instead of people. They became who the world needed them to be while secretly starving for someone to ask who they truly were. But there comes a moment in every human life when the mask becomes too heavy. The body begins to speak through anxiety, depression, fatigue, addiction, panic, chronic stress. Not because the body is broken, but because the body refuses to lie forever. The mind can deny pain for years. The body cannot. And what we call breakdown is often the beginning of truth. Because the wound is not merely a source of suffering, it is also a doorway into compassion. When you have truly suffered, you stop judging people so quickly. You begin to understand that behind anger there is often grief. Behind control there is fear. Behind arrogance there is insecurity. Behind silence there is pain nobody ever asked about. Wounded people are everywhere. Some are crying openly. Others are smiling beautifully while falling apart internally. The world teaches people to escape pain at all costs. Numb it, medicate it, distract it, consume over it, work through it, scroll through it. But unhealed pain does not vanish. It changes form. What is buried alive never dies, and so the wound keeps appearing in relationships, in addictions, in self-sabotage, in emotional disconnection, in the inability to rest, in the fear of intimacy, and the constant need for validation, not because you are weak, but because pain that is not acknowledged will always demand expression. The greatest spiritual transformation begins the moment a person has the courage to sit with their own suffering without running away, to feel grief without becoming it, to feel anger without being consumed by it, to feel fear without surrendering to it. That is where wisdom is born. Not from books, not from theories, but from direct human experience honestly faced. A person who has confronted their own darkness carries a different kind of light, a quieter light, a deeper light, a light that does not need to dominate others because it is no longer afraid of itself. Your wound can become the place where love finally enters, because sometimes the heart has to crack open before truth can reach it. The people who transform this world are not people who never suffered. They are people who refuse to let suffering make them cruel. They turn pain into understanding, abandonment into empathy, grief into presence, loss into wisdom. And there is nothing more powerful than a human being who no longer hides from themselves. Because once you face your deepest wound, fear begins to lose its authority over your life. You stop needing to prove your worth. You stop chasing validation from people incapable of giving love. You stop betraying yourself just to belong. You stop confusing survival with living. And for the first time, maybe in your entire life, you begin to meet the person underneath the pain. Not the mask, not the trauma response, not the performance, but the real human being who was there all along, waiting beneath the wound to finally be seen. The most painful abandonment in life is not always when someone else leaves you. It is when you leave yourself in order to be accepted by others. Many people learned very early that being themselves was dangerous. They discovered that honesty created rejection, that emotions created discomfort, that authenticity threatened connection. So they slowly began cutting pieces of themselves away just to survive. A child who is constantly criticized learns to silence their voice. A child who is ignored learns to stop expressing needs. A child who receives love only when performing learns that worth must be earned. Ned. And years later, the adult looks successful, respected, admired, even loved, while secretly feeling invisible to themselves, because survival often demands self-abandonment before healing demands self-return. People call it maturity when someone suppresses emotion. They call it strength when someone never asks for help. They call it kindness when someone constantly sacrifices themselves for everyone else. But many of these behaviors are not signs of inner peace. They are signs of adaptation. They are wounds disguised as virtues. Some people have become experts at reading everybody else's emotions while remaining completely disconnected from their own. They know how to comfort others, but do not know how to comfort themselves. They know how to show up for everyone except the person inside them who has been begging for attention for years. And eventually a human being becomes exhausted from carrying a life that does not belong to their soul. The body feels it first. The anxiety, the heaviness, the inability to rest, the constant tension in the chest, the emotional numbness, the silent resentment. Not because the body is weak, but because the body knows when the soul has been abandoned. 1. You can achieve extraordinary things while still betraying yourself every day. You can build careers, relationships, reputations, even families, while internally disappearing piece by piece. Because external success does not guarantee internal connection. There are people surrounded by applause who secretly feel empty. There are people constantly needed by others who feel completely unseen. There are people smiling in every photograph while internally carrying unbearable loneliness. Why? Because they built a life around who they had to become instead of who they truly are. The world rewards performance very quickly, but the soul always charges a price for pretending. Every time you say yes when your spirit is screaming no, you abandon yourself. Every time you tolerate disrespect because you fear losing connection, you abandon yourself. Every time you silence your truth to avoid conflict, you abandon yourself. Every time you ignore your pain and call it weakness, you abandon yourself. And self-abandonment does not happen once. It happens in thousands of tiny moments where your need for acceptance becomes greater than your loyalty to your own soul. This is why so many people feel disconnected even in relationships. Because no one can truly love a version of you that was created only to survive. Real power is not domination. Real power is not control. Real power is not becoming emotionally untouchable. Real power is having the courage to remain connected to yourself in a world that constantly pressures you to betray who you are. That kind of power changes everything. Because the moment you stop abandoning yourself, something inside you begins to heal. You stop chasing people who only value your sacrifices. You stop shrinking yourself to fit inside other people's comfort. You stop apologizing for your humanity. You stop confusing being needed with being loved. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you begin breathing as yourself instead of as a performance. Many people think self-abandonment looks dramatic. Often it looks ordinary. It looks like constantly overworking while ignoring exhaustion. It looks like laughing while hurting internally. It looks like saying I'm fine because you fear burdening others. It looks like staying in environments that slowly destroy your spirit because leaving feels terrifying. Human beings will tolerate enormous pain just to avoid rejection. That is how deeply the fear of abandonment lies inside us. But what most people never realize is this: the more you abandon yourself to keep others, the more disconnected you become from life itself. Because your soul cannot thrive in betrayal. There is a reason why people feel empty after years of pleasing everyone around them. There is a reason why so many successful people secretly feel lost. There is a reason why anxiety often grows louder in people who constantly ignore themselves. The inner self does not disappear when neglected. It waits patiently, quietly, through every distraction and every performance, waiting for the moment you finally decide to come home to yourself. And coming home to yourself is not comfortable at first, because once you stop performing, you must face the grief of how long you lived disconnected from your own truth. You begin to realize how many decisions were made from fear instead of love. How many relationships survived only because you betrayed your own needs. How many years were spent trying to become acceptable instead of authentic. That realization hurts deeply, but it also liberates, because awareness is the beginning. Energy of freedom. The moment you notice your patterns, they begin losing power over you. The moment you recognize your self-betrayal, you create the possibility of self-respect. The moment you stop running from yourself, your healing truly begins. And healing is not becoming someone new. Healing is recovering the person you were before fear taught you to disappear. The most powerful people are not those who never feel pain. They are people who can sit honestly with themselves without needing masks. They are people who can say no without guilt. People who can feel emotion without shame. People who can disappoint others without abandoning their own truth. That kind of inner strength cannot be purchased. It is earned through painful self-confrontation, because the truth is nobody teaches us how to belong to ourselves. Most people are taught how to achieve, obey, impress, compete, and survive. But very few are taught how to listen to their own inner voice. And without that connection, people spend their lives searching externally for what can only be restored internally. No relationship can replace self-connection. No success can heal self-rejection. No amount of validation can silence the pain of abandoning who you truly are. But the moment you stop betraying yourself, your entire relationship with life changes. You begin choosing peace over approval, truth over performance, authenticity over attachment, presence over perfection. And suddenly the energy you once spent pretending becomes available for living, because there is immense freedom in no longer needing to become someone else to deserve love. There is immense peace in finally listening to the voice inside you that has been ignored for years. And there is nothing more powerful than a human being who has decided that their soul is no longer negotiable. The human mind is obsessed with control. Control the future, control emotions, control people, control outcomes, control uncertainty. From the moment we experience pain, we begin building strategies to protect ourselves from ever feeling vulnerable again. Some people try to control through perfection, some through anger, some through success, some through silence, some through manipulation, some through constant busyness. But beneath every form of control lies the same frightened question: how do I make sure I never get hurt again? And that question quietly, why, shapes entire lives. People control conversations because they fear rejection. They control relationships because they fear abandonment. They control schedules because uncertainty terrifies them. They control emotions because vulnerability once felt unsafe. What appears to be confidence is often fear wearing expensive clothes. The tragedy is that many people spend their whole lives trying to dominate the external world while remaining completely disconnected from the internal one. They know how to manage appearances but do not know how to understand themselves. They know how to suppress emotion but not how to process it. They know how to perform strength while secretly collapsing inside. Because control can imitate power, but it is not power. Control is often the desperate attempt to escape pain. Awareness is the courage to face it. And those are completely different ways of living. The controlling mind believes peace comes from forcing life to obey its expectations. But life has never obeyed human fear. People leave, bodies age, loss arrives uninvited, plans collapse, certainty disappears, and no amount of control can protect a human being from the reality of being alive. That I asks why so many people are exhausted. Not because life is only difficult, but because they are fighting reality every single day. The more afraid a person becomes internally, the more rigid they become externally. And eventually they stop living. They start managing life instead of experiencing it. Awareness changes everything because awareness does not try to dominate reality. It tries to understand it. Awareness notices fear without becoming controlled by fear. Awareness notices anger without turning anger into identity. Awareness notices pain without building an entire personality around suffering. Most people react unconsciously because they have never learned how to observe themselves. A person criticizes them and immediately rage appears. Someone ignores them and immediately insecurity takes over. Something uncomfortable happens and instantly they escape through distraction, addiction, scrolling, overworking, overeating, emotional shutdown. Not because they are weak, because unconscious pain always demands immediate relief. But awareness creates space between the feeling and the reaction. And inside that space lies freedom. That is the spiritual weapon most people never discover. Not force, not dominance, not aggression, but the ability to remain conscious in moments where the unconscious mind wants to take over. Anyone can react. Very few people can remain present. It takes no awareness to scream when angry. It takes awareness to ask, what pain inside me is being touched right now? It takes no awareness to chase validation endlessly. It takes awareness to recognize the wound beneath the hunger for approval. It takes no awareness to blame others for every emotional storm. It takes awareness to sit honestly with your own inner chaos without escaping it. That kind of awareness transforms a human being from the inside out. Because once you become conscious of your patterns, you stop being imprisoned by them. The unconscious mind repeats pain automatically. The conscious mind interrupts the cycle. A person abandoned in childhood may unconsciously choose relationships where abandonment feels familiar. A person raised around criticism may become addicted to perfection. A person deprived of love may spend their life trying to earn worth through achievement. And without awareness, people call these patterns personality. But awareness exposes the hidden machine. Irony of suffering. Suddenly you begin seeing that your reactions are not random. Your fears are not random. Your attachments are not random. Your defenses are not random. They are adaptations. Survival strategies created by a nervous system trying to protect itself from old pain. And once you see that clearly, compassion enters the room. Not self-pity, not excuses, compassion. Because awareness allows you to understand yourself instead of constantly judging yourself. Most people are at war with themselves every day, fighting emotions, fighting thoughts, fighting vulnerability, fighting reality, fighting their own humanity. But awareness ends the war. The moment you observe your inner experience without hatred, something profound happens. Healing begins. Because what is seen clearly can finally transform. What is denied remains powerful. That is why awareness is far more dangerous to fear than control will ever be. Control suppresses symptoms. Awareness reveals causes. Control says, how do I stop feeling this? Awareness asks, why is this feeling here? And one question creates avoidance while the other creates wisdom. People often think spirituality means becoming calm all the time. It does not. True spirituality means becoming conscious enough to stop abandoning yourself in moments of discomfort. It means feeling anger without becoming cruelty, feeling grief without becoming hopelessness, feeling fear without surrendering your entire life to it. That is real inner power. Because awareness allows you to witness the storm without drowning inside it. A conscious human being still feels pain, still feels sadness, still feels uncertainty, but they are no longer possessed by every emotional wave that enters their mind. They become the observer instead of the prisoner. And this changes every relationship in life. Without awareness, people project unresolved pain onto others constantly. They blame, attack, manipulate, withdraw, control, criticize, cling. Not because they are evil, but because unconscious suffering seeks expression. But awareness interrupts projection. A conscious person begins asking, is this situation truly about the present moment? Or is an old wound speaking through me? That question alone can save relationships, families, even entire lives. Because when awareness enters a human being, responsibility enters with it. No longer responsibility rooted in shame. Responsibility rooted in truth. You stop making other people responsible for emotions you refuse to understand within yourself. You stop demanding the external world heal wounds you have never faced internally. You stop trying to control life because you begin understanding life. And understanding creates peace where control only creates exhaustion. There's extraordinary freedom in realizing that you do not need to dominate every experience to survive it. You only need the awareness to remain present within it, because ultimately the greatest prison is not pain itself. It is unconsciousness. A person unaware of themselves can spend an entire lifetime repeating the same suffering with different faces, different relationships, different environments, different excuses. But awareness breaks repetition. Awareness says, I see the fear, I see the wound, I see the pattern. And because I can see it, I no longer have to become it. That is the spiritual weapon inside every human being. The quiet ability to witness your own mind without surrendering your soul to every fear that passes through it.